Hello everyone, I'm Florian. I'm a concept artist and art director at Fireball Studio. And in this video I'm gonna show you a little bit about my work back in 2021 on World of Warcraft, where I had the opportunity to do some visual development and concept art for the game. The objective of this video is to share my thought process behind the different artworks, how I try to convey a sense of story, and how I think about the different narrative layers. I will also showcase my process a little bit and walk you through how I created some of these concepts. This first concept is one of the first sketches I did for the project. I made quite a few like this, but I can only show a bunch of them because I didn't get the authorization from Blizzard to show everything. When I first started working on the project, I wanted to do some quick and rough sketches to set the mood. I think it's a pretty standard first step for this kind of work. My initial thought was to do some natural environments and avoid getting caught too early in architectural details. I wanted to suggest what you might find in the first zones of an expansion, something welcoming but also mysterious. Here we are in the depths underground in caves, so it's not easy to find that welcoming feel. For example, with this concept I wanted to go for something eerie but also imply that there was a thriving ecosystem. I went for a warm, cool contrast that gives the place a slightly cozy vibe. The addition of those secondary orange-yellow lights changed the surrounding blues into violet and pinks, and I thought it was a pretty cool effect. The second concept was more about the idea of the transition from the surface to the depths. I did a few in this vein, and here I wanted to try mixing the natural look of a cave with ferns that like humidity and do not like too much the light, and also roots that go deep underground with like suggestions of an ancient civilization or whole temples. It shows that this place isn't just natural. That's why I added those enormous chains. It reminds me of the kind of visual language from places like the Moria, where you can find the Balrog in The Lord of the Rings, where you suddenly feel like you've entered a world not managed by humanoids or animals, but by like giants or gods. For this piece I wanted something very natural and simple, so I used light coming from the outside as if we'd found a well and descended into it. You can see the small rope and the surroundings are illuminated just by this little shaft of light. The rest of the decor fades into something very dark and very black, which creates some mystery but also makes you want to explore further. These concepts were made quickly, often in a day, using 3D base for things like the chains and to get that natural diffused lighting that I like. I just added a few details for the painting to create a small scene and give it an interesting direction. After this brief exploratory phase, I started getting into more details, imagining landmarks for the player. This is the moment where the player discovers a point of interest. They've traveled through mysterious natural spaces and then leave the mystery behind and discover something. It's the player's first major discovery. I made it a bit like a player journey where we start at the top, we descend, we discover some natural mysterious path, and then bam, we arrive at an interesting, flamboyant landmark that makes you want to finish the path and go talk to the merchant or discover the civilizations there. Still in that same vein, I wanted to show some point of interest in darker settings as well. So I had to think about how to illuminate it with a quite dark skybox. I don't think Blizzard kept that idea alive for this expansion, but it might be reused later down the line, I don't really know. I like the idea of natural terraces with strange plants that only grow on the ground, maybe playing with fluorescence a little bit. I know from experience that when everything glows a little bit too much, it gets tiring, especially in WoW. So I try to be subtle about it and try to find more ways to illuminate the space. So I wanted to imagine a city without getting into the architectural details, mostly to set a mood and see if it would start a conversation and lead to more details. The team at Blizzard gave me very broad topics to work on, never anything very precise. Probably because at the time they didn't really know the story yet, or maybe because they wanted to see where artists like me would take it. With very limited context, I had to kind of come up with my own small bits of stories. So sometimes they would adapt my concept to fit the lore, but sometimes I would inspire ideas they hadn't considered. This is what this blue sky phase is all about. I did a concept inspired by the first city with the squarish structures I showed at the beginning, suggesting ancient temple ruins. The creative director asked me to push verticality on this one. He wanted it to feel like you couldn't even see the ceiling, creating a sense of sky and openness, even though we were underground. It wasn't easy, but it opened the door to more detailed village exploration afterwards. I pulled back the camera to show the city from a more cinematic angle. I'm happy with that piece because it captures the sense of discovery. Unlike a typical underground journey where you expect only caves, here you suddenly stumble upon a vast, living civilization. It is tricky to remind players that they are underground when the lighting feels almost like daylight. Since an expansion set entirely underground can't just leave the player in darkness, we need to find a solution to justify this sort of lighting setup. Blizzard later solved this with like a giant crystal embedded in the ceiling that diffuses natural light. I also thought of a massive waterfall at the planet's core, with mist rising like clouds at Niagara Falls, creating a blue backdrop. That way you could justify clouds and a sky, even underground. I tried to create layers to the story. For example, maybe I imagined smaller cascades that could suggest an old irrigation system from a distant past. Maybe ancient titans built machinery or temples here long ago, but disappeared, leaving the ruins to be occupied later by a more primitive civilization. At that point, I really leaned into the idea of an underground troll civilization, wild, ancient, and mysterious, tied to the world's early history. I imagine factions might exist inside the civilization. One primitive but friendly group that welcomes the player, one darker group, perhaps worshipping old gods or practicing strange rites. This concept balances warm, inviting tones that makes you want to enter, mixed with unsettling elements. You can see trees with aggressive silhouettes, rocks shaped strangely, almost like teeth, and spiderweb-like arabesques that feel both elegant and eerie at the same time. I wanted to push the storytelling further and expand on the city's secrets. What if during our descent we found giant roots? I imagined the local trolls acting as caretakers, dedicating their lives to a colossal world tree. I left the lore implication open. This could be a brand new world tree, or it could be Teldrassil itself, burned by Sylvanas on the surface, yet secretly surviving and being nursed back to health down here by the trolls. I visualized players stumbling upon villages nested deep within the living wood. I didn't dive into heavy detail, I just wanted to capture the spirit of life persisting beneath the destruction, inspiring the team to find narrative links between past events on the surface and our discovery underground. Concept art isn't just about establishing a mood. It's about grounding that mood in reality to create a compelling world building. For this piece I needed to zoom in and demonstrate how the landmark functions. My goal was to clarify the circulation flow, the layout of the terraces, and the specific design of the tents. I wanted to visually tell the story of adaptation, showing exactly how the trolls claimed this space, integrating their organic, lived-in village directly on top of the ancient temple ruins. I also wanted to demonstrate the versatility of water in this biome. We designed everything from organic waterfalls to complex hydraulic systems used for irrigation. The specific concept explores the submerged environment, where I introduced the idea of sunken lore, ancient shipwrecks and debris from past battle, serving as environmental storytelling for the player to uncover. Let's explore the darker side of the lore. I reasoned that if there were factions among the trolls, one might serve a darker power. The Nerubians were the obvious answer for an underground antagonist, and this intuition aligned closely with Blizzard's internal roadmap. I conceptualized scenes of trolls facing ancient portals, waiting for or summoning their return. My goal was to design the payoff moment, that split second where the suspense breaks and the giant Nerubians are finally revealed. Treating concept art like a keyframe in a movie allows me to inject a stronger narrative arc into the environment. For the architecture, I imagined structures woven together with spider silk to prevent collapse. Some visual language is hinted in this concept, like the arachnoid doors, the web-like arabesques. The goal was always to generate as many ideas as possible, not finalize details. That's why you might find all of these pieces a bit far from the typical World of Warcraft aesthetic, which, looking back, is something that I regret a bit. I would have loved to have more time to really get the shapes and art style right, but it wasn't really the core of this job. Working on World of Warcraft was a lifelong dream of mine. I started playing the game when I was 12 years old, and this world has truly stayed with me ever since. I've kept playing over the years, and the art style is just very close to my heart. To go from a fan to actually participate in the creation of a small part of this world with Blizzard was an incredible experience. I hope this video sparks some ideas for your own work. I'm planning to do deep dives on some of these concepts in the future, so tell me which one is your favorite and I might start with that one. Thanks for watching.